Homeless boy prevents a disaster and forces a politician to resign. The world was never the same again. A barefoot street boy runs against time, weaving between cars and sirens, holding a torn piece of paper where he drew by hand a map of what he just saw: exposed wires, a hidden timer, the smell of gas. He tries to shout, but no one hears him. He is invisible. Just another dirty kid on the sidewalk. Until a woman, about to enter the Capitol building, stops. Their eyes meet for a second. He doesn't ask for food. He only says, "They're going to hurt everyone." That morning, the world nearly ended in silence. But because of an ignored boy, not only was a tragedy prevented, a scandal was exposed, and one of the most powerful politicians in the country resigned before millions. If this touched you in any way, like the video and subscribe to the channel. The rain streamed down the clogged gutters of Pennsylvania Avenue on a gray Tuesday evening forgotten on the calendar. The traffic honked impatiently, and the noise of the city drowned out any cry for help. But 11-year-old Malik knew he couldn't stop. His barefoot feet, cut by the wet asphalt, seemed to scream with each step, but he didn't hesitate. He carried in his hands a torn piece of cardboard, covered with hurried scribbles. It was all he had, the only proof of what he had seen. Half an hour earlier, Malik had been digging through the trash bags behind an administrative building near the Capitol. He had learned to pick strategic spots. Wealthy offices threw away good food and sometimes even almost new shoes. But that day, there was no stale bread, no luck. Just a strange noise coming from inside a maintenance hatch partially open. Curious, Malik peeked inside. He saw red and green wires, a blinking light, and a small device with descending numbers. The air smelled like gas. Instinctively, he stepped back. Then he returned. He watched a man in a dark hoodie leave hurriedly, cross the alley, and disappear through the side door of the Cannon building. That wasn't normal. Malik might just be a street kid, but he had learned early that when something seemed wrong, it was. He scribbled everything he remembered on the cardboard: the hatch, the wires, the door the man entered. Then he ran. He ran because he understood that if no one knew, someone would die. Maybe many people. He passed a police officer on the corner and tried to explain, but only heard, "Go play somewhere else, kid." He tried to enter a federal building but was stopped. Finally, he saw a woman in a hurry outside the Rayburn House office building. She was on the phone, a badge on her chest, a crossbody bag. Malik pulled on her coat with force. "AM, please listen. There's a bomb." She turned with irritation, startled. But seeing his eyes, wide, wet, intense, she hesitated. "What?" she asked, looking around. "I saw it. It's all there. It's going to explode, I swear." For a second, the world slowed down. The woman, named Madison Cole, was a congressional aide to Representative Greg Tillman. She had deadlines, unread emails. But at that moment, something inside her, maybe instinct, maybe empathy, made her trust him. She pulled the boy inside, crossed the lobby, ignoring judging glances. She went up 2 flights of stairs and took Malik straight to the on-duty security guard, who luckily had known Madison for years. Malik explained everything. He drew again, this time on a napkin, pointed directions. The guard called for backup. 10 minutes later, authorities discreetly evacuated part of the complex. They found the device. It had not yet been activated, but it was deadly. The preliminary report spoke of a technical failure, but those who disarmed it knew it was an attack, and a well-planned one. The next day, Malik was no longer around. He vanished. Returned to the shadows, maybe out of fear, maybe out of habit. The city, however, didn't remain indifferent. Madison tried to find him. She went to shelters, asked other street kids, showed photos of him captured by security cameras. Nothing. The boy who saved dozens of lives had disappeared in the same city that ignored him his entire childhood. The news went viral with a delay. The government tried to suppress the case, claiming nothing was confirmed. But someone within the security force leaked the information. It was a street kid who prevented a disaster. A discredited reporter, Oscar Clay, who worked for a local news agency in Arlington, picked up the story and headlined, "The Boy Who Saved Congress and Vanished." Social media embraced the narrative. Invisible hero. Gutter angel. The boy no one listened to. But Washington, as always, was faster to forget than to thank. Without a clear image, without a full name, Malik would soon become just an urban legend until something else reignited it all. 5 days later, an anonymous tip reached the same reporter, Oscar. The tip included a grainy video showing a hooded man leaving the alley that same afternoon, crossing the Senate staff courtyard. The video was short, but in the background, amid the street sounds, something incredible could be heard. A nervous voice on the phone saying, "The boy saw it. The plan won't work." Oscar froze when he heard that. It wasn't just an accident. It was a cover-up. And Malik, somehow, was the key witness. Meanwhile, the boy slept under a bridge on Independence Avenue, unaware that his name was circulating in the halls of power. The men behind the plan wanted to ensure he wasn't found. Malik was just a child, but now he was a threat. Tyrone, a homeless man with a hoarse voice and thick beard who treated Malik like a younger brother, began to notice something was wrong. Men in suits had shown up twice nearby, asking about the kid from the Capitol. First, they offered money. Then, they threatened. Tyrone grabbed Malik's arm and said, "Kid, the streets taught you a lot, but now we need to leave. You've become a problem for powerful people." Malik, confused, asked if he was wanted for stealing something. Tyrone only replied, "You saw too much, and that scares people who've never slept on the cold ground." That night, they decided to hide in Georgetown, among the old alleys between the stone buildings. But time was running out. Oscar, now obsessed with the story, tracked the signs like a detective. And Madison, pressured by the office to stay out of that narrative, decided she couldn't stay silent. She remembered the boy's eyes. Eyes that didn't lie. The sun struggled to rise that Thursday, hidden behind an iron-colored sky. The air in Washington felt heavier, as if the city's concrete could sense something about to break. Malik, lying on a damp piece of carpet behind a storage unit in Georgetown, slept with one eye half open. Tyrone kept watch, cigarette in his mouth and hand inside his coat, as if still waiting for the war that never ended. He had grown up afraid of sirens, but now what scared him most was silence. And that dawn, the silence was absolute. Oscar Clay's story had gained traction. The video had been analyzed by security experts, and the audio revealed more than it seemed. The boy saw was just the beginning. Overlapping voices suggested names, locations, orders, and someone, at some point in the recording, said, "If this leaks Brooks Falls, it's over." Nathaniel Brooks, veteran senator from North Carolina, 3 terms, influential on energy and national security committees, one of the most recognizable faces in Congress, and until then, above any suspicion. Oscar hadn't slept in 2 days. On his improvised desk in the basement of the agency where they barely offered him coffee, there were post-its, maps, photos, notes on napkins, and 3 active cell phones. One of them rang at 6:42 a.m. It was Madison. Her voice sounded different. Urgent, angry. "I found someone who knows the boy." Oscar almost dropped the phone. Madison explained she had been at the South Street shelter and found old records of Malik. His full name was Malik Vernon Booker. Born in Newark, New Jersey. Orphaned at 5. Missing since 8. Officially considered location unknown. A ghost of the system. "There's a man with him," Madison said. "A homeless guy named Tyrone Mays. He's helped other kids before. The protective type, but they're hiding." Oscar took a deep breath. He had the story of the century in his hands, but it was a dangerous story. If Brooks's involvement was real, if Malik had seen more than he'd already shared, it could cost dearly, too dearly. Still, he didn't hesitate. He told Madison not to tell anyone, not even her co-workers. They'd arranged to meet in a public, busy, yet discreet place. She would try to convince Malik to show up. Only he could say what he truly saw. Meanwhile, Brooks already knew. Someone in some office, security, media, maybe both, had informed him the recording had leaked. The senator, expressionless in his leather chair, stared out the 9th floor window, like someone calculating the damage. An aide tried to downplay it. "It's still just speculation, sir." "No, it's not," Brooks replied, coldly. "If they find the boy, and he talks, it's over. In the streets." Malik tasted for the first time the bitter flavor of being remembered. The world had ignored him for so long that now, when people claimed they wanted to protect him, it all felt like a lie. Tyrone tried to convince him otherwise, but the boy remained silent. He felt something he'd never known how to name: fear on the inside, rage on the outside. "They just want me to disappear again, right? Just like before." "It's not the same now, Malik. Now people are listening to you. But you can't trust them. They say they'll help, but no one ever stays." Tyrone had no answer. He knew the boy was right. The street teaches you not to believe in promises, only in actions. So he decided to act himself. He grabbed an old backpack, packed some clothes and 2 packs of crackers, and said, "Let's go see this reporter. But if anything smells wrong, we run." Like always. By late afternoon, at an abandoned bus stop between Constitution Avenue and 3rd Street NW, Oscar and Madison waited. The clock read 5:08 p.m. when they saw Malik, hood up, hands in his pockets, walking slowly beside Tyrone. Oscar stood, nearly stumbled over his own feet. Malik stopped a few steps away. He stared at them. He was thin, eyes sunken, but his posture was steady. Madison was the first to speak. "I was there that day, remember? You pulled on my jacket. I heard you, and I believed you." Malik looked at her for a moment, then nodded slightly. "So why are you looking for me now?" "Because they want to silence you," Oscar said plainly. "And because you know something no one else does. And the country needs to hear it." Malik said nothing. Then he pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. It was the same piece of cardboard he had used days ago. Confusing drawings, arrows, words like gray door, blinking clock, gas smell. He pointed to a detail in the corner. "This guy here, the one in the hoodie. I saw him again, right before I vanished. He left through the back door with a badge. Security type, I think. But it wasn't normal. He was nervous. And after that, everyone pretended they didn't see anything." Oscar pulled out his notebook, asked what else Malik remembered. The boy began to describe faces, phrases, whispered orders. Tyrone, beside him, listened in silence. He also remembered some details, though he hadn't seen the man directly. As Malik spoke, Madison noticed something. He wasn't just repeating a memory. He was reconstructing a puzzle from scattered pieces, and now it made sense. It wasn't just any attack. It was an attempt to destroy evidence. Something Brooks wanted buried, with gas, with fire, with innocent victims. Oscar recorded everything with permission. But he knew more needed to be done. Malik had to testify before a committee. He had to be legally recognized as a witness. It was dangerous but necessary. That night, while Malik slept on the couch in the basement of a small community newspaper, protected by 3 locks and a Tyrone armed with a pocket knife, Oscar began to write. It wasn't just a news piece. It was a denunciation. And it began with the sentence, he didn't want to be a hero. He just didn't want anyone to die. The city would wake up different the next morning. On Friday morning, While the corridors of power in Washington were still yawning under fluorescent light, the city was hit by an unexpected blow. Oscar Clay's article was published at 6:01 a.m. with the title, "The Boy Who Saw Too Much and the Bomb That Didn't Explode." The words echoed like thunder. The article didn't just recount what Malik had seen. It included excerpts of the audio, the original scan drawing, and most notably, an enlarged security image, grainy but identifiable, of the man in a hoodie entering an exclusive door in the administrative wing of Congress, one used only by high-ranking officials. In the first few hours, the article amassed thousands of shares. By 10 a.m., major newspapers like the Washington Post and Politico were already covering the story. At 11:45 a.m., Nathaniel Brooks' team called an emergency press conference to clarify irresponsible rumors. The senator's face appeared, cold on CNN, stiff expression, navy blue suit, dark tie, eyes fixed on the teleprompter. "These insinuations are a cowardly attack on my work. This is a desperate attempt to sabotage the essential reforms we are advancing." But for the first time, Brooks' voice faltered mid-sentence. A reporter in the back of the room asked loudly, "Do you know Malik Vernon Booker?" The question echoed like a gunshot. The senator hesitated. For a brief moment, his mask cracked. Across town, in the basement of the community newsroom, Malik watched the press conference with his legs crossed over a borrowed quilt. His eyes didn't blink. The TV flickered with static, but the image was clear enough. Beside him, Tyrone murmured, "That's the man who wants to erase you." Kid. Madison arrived moments later with 2 bags of food and a warning. "The ethics committee wants to hear from Malik. The pressure is unbearable. We have an emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow." But this is going to blow everything up. Oscar, reading live comments on the article, turned to her. "They're going to try to silence us before then. They've already blocked my access to the paper's internal system. Said we violated federal protocol. They're scared." Tyrone stood up slowly. He was calm, but his eyes didn't lie. He knew how to recognize the scent of danger, and it was in the air. "We're not going to wait for them to come to us," he said. "We're going to take this boy wherever he needs to be heard. But with the world watching, leave. They can't erase someone everyone's looking at." The idea struck like lightning. Oscar called an old college friend, now the host of a massively followed independent digital channel. He explained everything. In minutes, she didn't hesitate. Scheduled a live broadcast for that very night. No editing. No cuts. Malik would tell his version, what he saw, what he lived. Who tried to silence him. At 8 p.m., Malik sat in front of a simple camera. The background was an improvised studio, with a gray sheet behind him and makeshift lights. Oscar gave a brief introduction and stepped away. The image focused on the boy. The comment section beside the screen exploded the moment he began to speak. "My name is Malik Vernon Booker. I'm 11 years old. I've lived on the street since I was 8. And last week, I saw a man putting wires and a strange device inside a box in an alley behind the building, where the politicians work. His voice was firm. No frills. He told everything. The sketches. The failed attempt to warn the police. Madison. The guard. The bomb. The words he heard. The threats. Tyrone sitting beside him. And finally, he looked straight into the lens and said, "They said it was nothing. But if it hadn't been me, someone would have died. And they only saw me because I screamed. I always scream. It's just that before, no one listened. Millions watched." The tag #listen to Malik reached the top of the trending topics in less than 40 minutes. Politicians from other states spoke out. Activists demanded immediate protection for the boy. Artists, athletes, pastors, teachers. Everyone wanted to know, who is Malik? How is someone like him allowed to vanish for so many years? Brooks tried to respond. In an interview with a conservative radio station, he claimed it was all a well-scripted setup by ideological enemies. But when asked about the video, he stammered. And when questioned why his name appeared in an investigative audio, he hung up live on air. The next morning, the Capitol was surrounded. Not by violent protests, but by a charged silence. Staff walked in groups, whispering. Brooks' office remained empty until noon. At 12:47 p.m., an official notice appeared on the Senate website. Senator Nathaniel Brooks has resigned due to health and family reasons. But no one believed it. Madison was outside. Upon seeing the news, she called. Malik. On the other end of the line, the boy simply asked, "Does this mean it's over?" Madison didn't know what to say. Because that moment, in truth, changed everything, but didn't fix everything. That afternoon, Congress announced an emergency proposal to expand child shelters and implement new procedures for missing minor cases. It would take time. As always, it would be slow. But something had changed. Now Malik's name was written in every paragraph. Meanwhile, Malik returned to the shelter where he'd once been rejected. This time, not as a guest, but as a symbol. They took a photo of him in front of the entrance. He didn't smile. He just stood still, hood up, hands in his pockets, eyes to the ground. He still felt invisible, despite everything. Tyrone walked up, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You're not just a name anymore, kid. Now you're a mirror. And mirrors make important people see themselves for real." The boy didn't respond. But for the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe ... someone would keep listening, even if he stopped screaming. Malik Booker's name was in the newspapers, on social media, in school debates, in cafe conversations around DuPont Circle, and in the speeches of activists in front of the Supreme Court. The boy no one used to see was now the central topic. In hearings, the subject of special reports, and the focus of nationwide solidarity campaigns. But while Washington buzzed with his name, Malik remained quiet. In the weeks following Brooks' resignation, the boy was placed under the temporary custody of Madison Cole, who volunteered to be his legal guardian until a formal decision could be made. She had resigned from Congressman Tillman's office 2 days after the scandal, saying she couldn't keep working in a place where silence is worth more than truth. Madison moved to a modest apartment in the Petworth neighborhood. There was no luxury, but there was peace. Malik now had a mattress of his own, regular meals, a hot shower, and a closet where clothes fit neatly folded. He didn't talk much, but his eyes had changed. Still cautious, but less distressed. He observed everything like someone testing the limits of a new world. Tyrone, meanwhile, declined all interviews and offers of financial assistance. He remained on the streets by choice, but now carried an old cell phone, a gift from Madison. With only 3 contacts, Oscar's hers, and a night shelter in Anacostia. He said it was better to keep his eyes on the places no one else looked. Oscar Clay, once a near-fired reporter, had become the voice of civil denunciation. He received offers from major outlets, but turned them down. He preferred to remain independent. He published a series of articles titled "The Voices We Silence," telling stories similar to Malik's: invisible children, erased witnesses, forgotten little heroes before they were ever noticed. Despite the spotlight, Malik still felt out of place. He attended sessions with a therapist recommended by Madison. Her name was Dr. Rosen, and she wore floral dresses with sneakers. She didn't ask many questions. Let him speak when he wanted. Sometimes he just drew. One afternoon, Malik sketched a house without windows and a single open door. In the middle, a child held a candle. "What's behind the door?" she asked. "Darkness." "And the candle?" "It only works if someone's watching." The answer stayed with her for days. Meanwhile, Congress rushed to approve a new protection program for at-risk street children. They called it the Booker Amendment. Madison disliked the name. She said she didn't want the boy turned into a symbol, but Oscar found it powerful. It's his name, and now it's on paper. Real paper. That changes the rules. The media began to show up less frequently. The scandal cycle ran its course. Outrage, debate, promises, then silence. Malik seemed to know that was the natural order of things. Attention is fleeting. The fight is not won. Night, Madison found him awake at 3 a.m., sitting on the kitchen floor with an open box of cookies and an unfinished drawing in hand. It was the Capitol building, but with roots growing from the windows and climbing the walls. Can't sleep? I dream of the sound before the bomb. Even though it didn't explode. What do you hear? No one. She sat beside him on the floor. Want to know a secret? When I was little, my mom used to say the world talks so loud that sometimes we can only hear it when someone who's quiet decides to speak. And when someone who's never had a voice finally speaks, the world stops. Even if just for a minute. Malik said nothing, then pointed to the drawing. This could be a school. Why? Because school should teach people to listen. But they only learn to talk. The next day, he surprised everyone by accepting an invitation from the principal of Thurgood Marshall Elementary to visit the school. It was just a visit. He hadn't promised to enroll, but he wanted to see what it was like. The principal, Mrs. Hernandez, greeted him with respect, not pity. She showed him the library, the computer lab, the playground where children were drawing on the pavement with chalk. Malik walked the hallways, ran his fingers along the lockers, peeked through the windows of classrooms. No one recognized him. No one pointed. He was just another curious kid visiting a school. In the library, he stopped in front of a thick book with a blue cover. It was titled Citizenship and Justice. He opened it randomly and read a sentence aloud. Justice is giving each what they are due, even when the world prefers otherwise. He closed the book. For the first time he asked, "Can I study here?" Mrs. Hernandez smiled. Madison cried quietly outside the room. Later that month, a new investigation implicated other members of Brooks Circle. The failed bombing had been part of a corruption scheme involving illegal energy contracts and tax data manipulation. Without knowing it, Malik had pulled the first thread of a web years in the making. Upon hearing the news, he simply said to Tyrone, now in regular contact with Madison, "It's like when you peel wallpaper and find mold underneath, right?" "Exactly, kid," Tyrone replied. "And you were the only one brave enough to pull it." On TV, debates began to emerge about how the country treated its forgotten ones. Malik never watched. Said he preferred the sounds of the street to the expert speeches. But secretly, he recorded the broadcasts on his phone and listened to them at night with the headphones Oscar gave him. One afternoon, Oscar found him alone on the rooftop of the old community newsroom. The boy was looking out toward the horizon, where DC's monuments pierced the cloudy sky. "You know what's the worst part?" Malik said without turning around. "What?" "That they still think it was luck I saw that bomb. But it wasn't. I was there because no one else wanted to be. And that's how they lose. Because we, the ones in the dark, we see first." Oscar said nothing. The world around them kept spinning. But something had already changed. Malik was no longer just a symbol. He was a presence. And presences don't fade. Malik Booker's name was in the newspapers, on social media, in school debates, in the cafe conversations of DuPont Circle, and in the speeches of activists outside the Supreme Court. The boy no one used to see was now a central topic in hearings, the subject of in-depth reporting, and the target of nationwide solidarity campaigns. But while Washington pulsed with his name, Malik stayed quiet. In the weeks following Brooks' resignation, the boy was placed under the temporary custody of Madison Cole, who volunteered to be his legal guardian until a court ruling. She had left Congressman Tillman's office 2 days after the scandal, saying, "I can't keep working in a place where silence is worth more than truth." Madison moved to a modest apartment in the Petworth neighborhood. There was no luxury, but there was peace. Malik now had his own mattress, regular meals, a hot shower, and a wardrobe where his clothes fit neatly folded. He didn't talk much, but his eyes had changed. Still cautious, but less anxious. He watched everything as if testing the boundaries of this new world. Tyrone, meanwhile, refused all interviews and financial offers. He chose to stay on the streets, but now carried an old cell phone, a gift from Madison, with only 3 contacts: Oscar, Madison, and a night shelter in Anacostia. He said it was better to keep his eyes on the places nobody looked at. Oscar Clay, once a nearly fired reporter, became the voice of civic whistleblowing. He received job offers from major media outlets but declined them. He preferred to remain independent. He published a series of articles titled "The Voices We Silence," telling stories similar to Malik's Invisible Children. Erased witnesses, forgotten little heroes before they were ever noticed. Even with all the attention, Malik still felt out of place. He attended therapy sessions with Dr. Rosen, recommended by Madison. She wore floral dresses and sneakers. She didn't ask many questions. She let him speak when he wanted to. Sometimes he just drew. One afternoon, Malik sketched a house with no windows and a single open door. In the center stood a child holding a candle. "What's behind the door?" she asked. "Darkness." "And the candle?" "It only works if someone looks." Her mind lingered on that answer for days. Meanwhile, Congress urgently approved a new protection program for street children at legal risk. They called it the Booker Amendment. Madison didn't like the name. She said she didn't want the boy turned into a banner. But Oscar found it symbolic. It's his name. And now it's on paper. On real paper. That changes the rules. The media presence began to fade. The scandal followed its usual cycle: outrage, debate, promises. Then silence. Malik seemed to know that was how things went. Attention was temporary. The fight WSN single quotes D. That one night, Madison found him awake at 3 in the morning, sitting on the kitchen floor with an open box of cookies and an unfinished drawing in his hand. It was the Capitol building, but with roots growing out of the windows and climbing the walls. "Can't sleep? I dream about the sound before the bomb, even though it never went off. What do you hear?" "No one." She sat down on the floor beside him. "Can I tell you a secret? When I was little, my mom used to say the world talks so loud that sometimes you can only hear it when someone who's quiet decides to say something. And when someone who never had a voice finally speaks, the world stops, even if just for a minute." Malik was silent, then pointed to the drawing. "This ... could be a school." "Why?" "Because school should teach people how to listen. But all they learn is how to talk." The next day, he surprised everyone by accepting an invitation from the principal at Thurgood Marshall Elementary to visit the school. It was just a visit. He hadn't promised to enroll, but he wanted to see what it was like. The principal, Mrs. Hernandez, welcomed him with respect, not pity. She showed him the library, the computer room, and the playground where children were drawing with chalk. Malik walked through the halls, ran his fingers along the lockers, and peeked through classroom windows. No one recognized him. No one pointed. He was just another curious boy visiting a school. In the library, he stopped in front of a thick book with a blue cover, titled Citizenship and Justice. He opened it at random and read a sentence aloud. "Justice is giving each person what is rightfully theirs, even when the world prefers otherwise." He closed the book. For the first time he asked, "Can I study here?" Mrs. Hernandez smiled. Madison cried quietly outside the room. That same month, a new wave of accusations hit other members of Brooks' inner circle. The failed bombing had been part of a corruption network involving illegal energy contracts and manipulated tax data. Malik, without realizing it, had unraveled a thread that had been tangled for years. When he heard the news, he simply told Tyrone, now in regular contact with Madison, "It's like when you pull back wallpaper and the mold shows up, right?" Exactly, kid, Tyrone replied. And you were the only one brave enough to pull it. On TV, debates began about how the country treats its forgotten. Malik never watched. He said he preferred the sounds of the street to expert opinions. But secretly, he recorded the broadcasts on his phone and listened to them at night with the headphones Oscar had given him. One afternoon, Oscar found him alone on the roof of the old community newsroom building. The boys stared at the horizon, where the DC monuments pierced the cloudy sky. You know what's worse? Malik said without turning. What? That they still think it was luck I saw that bomb. But it wasn't. I was there because no one else wanted to be. And that's how they lose. Because we, the ones in the dark, we see first. Oscar said nothing. The world around them kept turning. But something had already changed. Malik was no longer just a symbol. He was a presence. And presences don't fade.